the rusty red rocket strikes again. How many of you guys know what this is? Well, I bet you can figure out what that is. Missing something there. We broke the lug stud. Could have been avoided if I just used a torch, or if some more WD-40, or it may not have been avoidable at all. I don't know. I was able to get every other one off without breaking any lugs, but that one's toast. So we're gonna go ahead and swap that out today. And you're gonna have to disassemble probably the entire hub, so I will show you how to do that. Check out those mandals. Nice. I don't have a punch. I don't even have my sledgehammer, so none of that is ideal, but we're just gonna go ahead and try to knock out the stud. I've got this extension. I'm gonna place it on the front of the stud, and I'm just gonna hammer it a couple times, see what happens. Yeah, it's starting to back itself out. We're gonna need a bit more force. Need something heavier. A sledgehammer would be a lot better for this. I don't have my mini sledge, so pro tip, always make sure you actually got the right part from the parts store. They like to give you the wrong stuff all the time. Alright, feels like that's the correct fit. So we're gonna keep moving along here. I'm gonna grab a jack stand for the car. All right, so if you will take a look, I'll show you the first issue we are running into. Look on the back side here. That's the back side of that stud we're trying to knock out. It is contacting the rotor right now, so I'm gonna go ahead and rotate it around, see if there's gonna be any spot where I can slide that out without taking off the whole front hub, but I'm pretty sure there is no hope. Pretty sure this entire part is gonna have to come off, and it's probably rusted together right there. So we'll see. Well, we are going to have to take apart the hub, which is stupid, but whatever. And I might replace all the lug nuts while I'm in there. I'm not too sure, it just depends. So the first thing you want to do, it doesn't matter in the lock or the free position. I'm gonna leave it in the lock or in the free. You're just going to unbolt these little guys on the front here. They are all 10 millimeter. And then you should be able to get the cover off. And I'll actually save those. And full disclosure, even though I am in California, I'm in Northern California, and we actually, well, I don't know how, this truck was actually, it was by the beach. I got it from Santa Cruz, so it does have quite a bit of rust on it. There's actually some rust holes all the way through on the body that I'm gonna go ahead and patch it, and I'll show you guys how I do that later. But so far, this hasn't been too rusty, but the lug nuts were rusted enough to snap it in half. So I'm hoping these little cone washers in here, that I'll show you guys aren't too difficult, but I did soak everything with WD-40. Penetrating oil will work the same. Okay. It's relatively clean in there. I don't see any mud or anything caked on too badly. That's a good sign. So we'll take apart this. I think it's a, let me see, is it 10 or? I think it's a 12mm bolt in here. Yeah, 12. It's gonna help if you have an impact or some way to quickly zip it off so it doesn't spin. Just like that. All right, now we're gonna move on to the bolts up here. I believe they're also 12mm. Yep, and there's cone washers. There's gonna be a 12mm nut right up top here. And then, you know what, let me bring you in closer. So you're gonna have a 12mm nut, you're gonna have a washer, and then inside is a cone washer that you're gonna have to jar out. And I'll show you how I do that in a minute here. Here's the washer, here's the nut. We'll work on the cone washers later. And no. There's not too many pieces here that I'm worried about losing. I have done this once before, so I'm not really labeling anything or using cardboard templates. It's all pretty straightforward. But feel free to do so if you feel so inclined. Alright. Now for the fun part. All those cone washers. I'm gonna hit them one last time with WD-40. And we'll just hope they come out. So for this next part, what you're gonna wanna do to avoid damaging the threads, take the nut and thread it back on to the bolt just so that the tip is flush with the edge of the bolt. Just like that. And then we're gonna try to jar it loose. Again, I don't have a punch or anything, but it should work. Basically, the impact should jar that cone washer loose. At least it did on the other truck. So then once you have it, start to pull forward a little bit. There's a cut right down the face of the split washer, the cone washer. So you should be able to grab it by the outside and squeeze it, and that should help reduce the size enough to be able to swiggle it out. So here's the cone washer that we were talking about, and it's got this slit right down the middle that helps it compress and open up, and it slides right in the hub like that. So now we're gonna back our bolt off and we'll be able to remove it. All I did was I had the bolt on the front of the nut like that, and I hammered it a couple times. You have to use a good amount of force, just depends how much rust you have in there. Now we're gonna move around and try to do the rest of them in the same fashion. So I have a cameraman now. I will leave I'll leave everything running now so you guys can hopefully see this. Yeah, you should be able to see that. As I said, this truck is from the beach, so there's a good amount of rust on all the threads, and it just wasn't really hand threading that easily. So, clean it off with a wire brush, and now we're in business. That's about flush where we want to be. A brass punch would be a better idea, or any sort of drift, but I'm just using my ratchet because, I don't know, lazy, cheap. I try to show you guys stuff, and this is what happens. Maybe, I don't know if you guys can see, but see it start to lift up there? And we are home free. Free Willy. 4Runner 0, Mandals 1. Okay. There's the cone washer with its split. We're going to do the rest of them in the same fashion. Not too bad. And you can see there's really not a whole lot of dirt in here or anything. For the most part, it is just grease. So these bearings are all going to be pretty good. The same within here. It's all just grease. No nothing. No mud or sand or rust, so we're good. The gasket's still intact up here. Scuffed it a tiny bit, but it's doing its job. So we'll leave that alone. Now, in order to get the hub off, we're gonna have to remove some of this grease, and there's a snap ring in here, and then a couple 54mm nuts, I think, and a kind of a finger washer that bends over it that doesn't let the 54mm nut turn. So I'm gonna wipe out the grease so we can see what we're looking at, and I'll check back in. We are trying to get this snap ring off. So I've got it spread with these cheap pliers, and I don't have any other flatheads, so I'll just try to keep working its way off. Okay. So there's the snap ring. You can see it's starting to make its way off. It's under a little bit of pressure, so I'm just gonna cover it when I take it off. That's what we're removing. I'll keep that in my little deal. There's gonna be another washer with teeth, just like this. Now your axle shaft should be free to move in and out. And now, if you can see it, there is two, I think these are 54 or 52mm nuts that go around that actually hold the hub on. So, and there's a lock washer. I think there's 2 of those nuts and a lock washer in between. So, careful with that. So, we will see if we can bend back the tabs. I gotta clear some grease because these tabs should be over the sides of the nut. And then once we get them free, we can hammer it with a screwdriver to back it out lefty-loosey, and that should pull it off for us, hopefully. That's the idea. So, be right back. We are freeing up the tabs on that washer that I was telling you about. That locks it down. None of the other ones are bent. So this first 52 millimeter should be free to go ahead and spin. So let's try it. So here's one. That's all it looks like. We'll go ahead and keep that over here. Now this washer, yeah, it looks like it can actually just pry out. There's that. And that other one is coming out by hand. It doesn't appear to be stuck on there at all with any sort of torque. I do not believe those have a direction or an orientation as to which way they go on. Alright, let me look in here. Shouldn't the light in there a little bit? I don't think we have anything else to take off. There might be one more. Yeah, it looks like there is a washer with a tooth. Pick tool would be really handy right now. I lost mine, but I don't think this is gonna stop us from pulling off the hub. All right, here's the front axle shaft. We have the hub off and the bearing, and there's one more little it's like, I don't know, a washer or a race on the front of the bearing. It's just this guy, and then here's the bearing. It looks fine. It goes right on like this, and when you pull off the hub, that'll slide off with it. To get the hub off, you're gonna have to remove the brake. We have it just, the caliper sitting up there on top of the upper control arm. For that, there's going to be 2 bolts in the back that are 19 millimeter. If you look back here, right there and right there. Those, for me, they had red Loctite on them. I don't know who would have done that, since the caliper, you know, seemingly should come off and on every 50,000 miles, 100,000 miles, depending on how your rotors look. Either way, those are red Loctited on. I figured that out after the first one, so I hit it with a propane torch, and the second one came out pretty easily. And then there's 2 bolts right here that actually hold the caliper to the rotor and the dust shield. And that was through those brackets. I think those were 17 millimeter. And then after that, the whole front hub, the rotor just slides right off with the bearing. And then we're hanging out with this right over here. And on the back side is what you need to get to. These are 14 millimeter bolts. We have to back all those out
and then the front assembly with the studs will come off, and then you'll actually be able to back out these studs all the way. So a huge pain in the ass, definitely, but that's all that's left to do it. Right now, I don't have a way to, my impact gun couldn't bust these bolts free. Just hitting it with it, it was not going anywhere. So I don't know what they're torqued down to, and if I just try to do it by hand, I don't have anything to actually hold the rotor from spinning itself. So I think actually, I think I got an idea for you guys. Hang on, hold tight. This is what I got going on. This actually just came to me on the spot while I was thinking, no research. All I did was set the lugs in the rim's on the ground. This should hold it enough to pop these off. So let's check it out. Ooh, tough guy. Real tough guy. Okay, excuse me. I'm gonna get a different setup. And I don't think we broke it either, so. Nice. No Loctite, just a bolt and a washer. So I had to pry on this a little bit to get the front piece hub off of the rotor, but here's the well, there it is. So if you were smart, now would be the time to replace everything, all of the lugs. When I say everything, where did that lug go? Did you pull anything off of the seat?
Nope.
But I honestly don't think I'm gonna replace every lug. I think I'm probably just gonna leave it like this. And you know, get really mad when I have to replace it later. Can you put this back over there, please? Thank you. Now, for this part, actually, I need that lug again. All you gotta do, you use a lug and a nut to actually bring it forward and draw it in. You need some washers as well, so I'm gonna see what I got in the way of washers. But it's pretty straightforward how it works. I'll show you in a second. I'm just gonna tap it a tiny bit. Hopefully we can get it started. And then we will draw it in. So we're just using an existing lug nut and a stud to draw it in. That's basically the idea. We got the new lug in right here. She's good. So now we're gonna put the rotor back together. That's not right. Come on. And money. Yeah, that looks pretty lined up. We will go. I'm gonna put some anti-seize on these guys. I like to use anti-seize on pretty much everything. An important part, before we reinstall, I want to make sure the rotors are clean. So just a little bit of brake clean. I'm gonna go ahead and wipe them off. My greasy hands have been all over this, and you don't want to reinstall with a bunch of oil on there. You'll warp it and make hot spots. Rag wouldn't be a bad idea, but paper towel, whatever. We'll live. The rusty red rocket will live to make me do this again another day, probably. When it breaks another lug nut. Okay. We're gonna put a little bit of grease back here, and then we'll slide it back on. And we'll get our brake caliper situated back on here. Probably not super necessary to grease this up again. It's still pretty greasy from before, and there really wasn't any dirt in there. So the bearing was fine. So we're not gonna load it up, and we're not gonna clean it off too much because the grease was fine. And the same with that one. Be careful not to touch the back side, and then I'll clean the front in a second. Cool. We'll put our bearing nut. We'll clean the front off first, and then we'll do the bearing. Here's the bearing, still greased up. I think this front little washer, it does have a key on it, so it'll only go in one way. I'll have to re-clean that. So if you look on the shaft, there's a groove. It's usually oriented straight up. So in my case, we're gonna make sure, see that little hanging down nipple on the, make sure that is facing the right way. And then we will put on our 54. Twist it. You want to use 2 fingers to push that little keyed washer back in towards the axle and the differential as you spin the that nut. And get it down as much as you can, hand tight, and then we'll hammer it just a tiny bit, but not much, with the screw. So we put back on 54mm nut up against the washer, up against the bearing. Then we put on this little washer with the tabs on it. One tab we have folded back over the first 54mm nut, and then the second tab is right up top here. You can see it. I've got it folded down right against the top of the 54mm nut. So this front one can't back off. because it's held down by that tab. The back one can't really back off because it's sandwiched by all of these plus that tab. So the bearing shouldn't be able to fall out. And you want to make sure you get it seated enough that you see this shaft, there's a groove here. That groove is for your snap ring, but you have to fit the little washer with the teeth in there first as well. So you need to make sure you have enough room for all of that, and then the snap ring on top of that. So make sure you have enough room. I'm gonna throw a little bit of grease in here, then we're gonna button that down, and we'll put the caliper back on, and we'll keep rolling. Alright, so we've got the caliper back on. Two 19mm bolts in the back for the bracket, and two 17mm right on the back of the caliper. Now is going to be, we're gonna put this guy back on. Now, I think there's only one way it can go, because there's two dowels that you have to line it up with. And it won't go on if you don't have them lined up right. Now goes your, we might have dropped something, maybe not. We will, we're gonna bolt on this little guy that goes on the front of the axle shaft. It's a 12. We're gonna run it down with the impact. There's not a whole lot on this guy. You don't need a whole lot on that thing. Okay, then you're gonna go cone washer, regular washer, and bolt. I'm gonna go ahead, same thing I always do. I'm gonna throw a little bit of anti-seize right on the tips where the cone washer would go, where it's gonna stuff into its part. And hopefully that keeps it from rusting solid. I don't know, some people like anti-seize, some people don't. I don't like breaking bolts like what happened with my lug nut, so. Just with anti-seize, don't over torque things, because it's gonna be a lot less friction on the bolts when you're going in because of the anti-seize. So don't torque things down, don't over torque things, and you'll be just fine with anti-seize. So cone washer, regular washer, and nut, and that's it.